Formally open the meeting. You're all welcome. Just to remind members that all electronic devices, with the exception of the committee tablets, must be switched off completely whilst the committee is in session, as they do interfere with the transmission and recording of proceedings. So I'm asking members to just ensure that their tablets are also switched to mute mode to ensure that we have a good quality recording. Also, just to advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use their mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, and all devices are muted. They're obviously welcome also to connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi, and the password details are available on the gallery rules. It's not permitted to take photographs or to record any of the meetings. So apologies. Tom Buchanan, do members have any other apologies? Okay, member, just under Chair's business, one item, just in relation to the announcement on the 1% pay increase for health staff, particularly in light of the campaign from the College of Nursing, just seeking clarification from the Department and the Minister as to how this is processed now with regard to the living wage campaign specifically. So just seeking that clarity from the Department in relation to that. Right. Item 3 is the draft minutes of the meeting on Wednesday the 10th of February, which are at page 6 of your meeting pack. Sorry, Wednesday the 2nd of March, my mistake. Page 6 of your meeting pack. Are members content with the minutes?
Right.
Yep. Right. Okay, I just want to seek agreement from you also to agree the minutes of this meeting, as it is the last one scheduled for a mandate also. So just to have that agreement. Right, yeah. Okay, item 4 then, members, is the departmental briefing on an SL1, the Human Trafficking and Exploitation, Criminal Justice and Support for Victims Independent Guardian Regulations 2016. To advise members that departmental officials are here today to brief the committee on the SL1. I just refer members to pages 12 to 51 of your meeting pack for the relevant papers. And with us today we have Ailish McDaniel, Director of Family and Children Policy at the Department, Mr Paul McConville, Social Services Officer at the Department, and Mrs Carol Picton-Linnis, who's Deputy Principal, Adoption and Children Bill Team at the Department. So you're all very welcome. I'm just going to invite yourselves to make the opening remarks. We will open it up then to questions or comments. Ailish, is it yourself?
It is. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. We welcome the opportunity to provide the committee with briefing on the draft Human Trafficking and Exploitation, Criminal Justice and Support for Victims Independent Guardian Regulations of 2016. Members have been provided with the SL1 notification and also a copy of the summary report of responses to the consultation on the draft regulations, which details the overarching views of key stakeholders and the Department's subsequent response. The Human Trafficking and Exploitation, Criminal Justice and Support for Victims Act Northern Ireland 2015 received royal assent on the 13th of January 2015. And the objective of the Act is to provide Northern Ireland with a more robust legal framework in relation to the prosecution of traffickers and those subjecting people in Northern Ireland to conditions of slavery, the provision of improved support for the victims of trafficking, and tackling the demand for trafficking. Tragically, victims of human trafficking are often children or young people who may not be aware that they are being exploited, or may be frightened or confused about what the future holds for them. Consequently, Section 21 of the Act, as amended by the Criminal Justice Act Northern Ireland 2015, makes provision for an independent guardian to be appointed for child victims and potential victims of human trafficking and separated children, where the person with parental responsibility for the child is not in regular contact or is outside of the UK. The Act defines a trafficked child as a child who is being or who is about to be referred to a competent authority for a decision as to whether there are reasonable grounds to believe that the child is a victim of trafficking in human beings. And currently, that competent authority is the National Referral Mechanism. The Act defines a separated child as a child who has come to Northern Ireland and has been separated from both parents or from their legal or customary caregivers and may be at risk of harm because of that separation. This harm could include, but is not limited to, a risk of harm from abuse, exploitation or neglect. The definition ensures that those children who are in Northern Ireland in the company of adults who are not their parents or caregiver and are at no risk of harm, such as those on a school trip, for example, who may come from other countries, do not come within the scope of the legislation unnecessarily. Section 21 of the Act places a duty on the Health and Social Care Board to make arrangements to enable an independent guardian to be appointed to assist, represent and support a child. The arrangements must be made with a charity that will provide for the appointment of a person as an independent guardian. Section 2111 of the Act is amended by Section 101(3) of the Justice Act Northern Ireland 2015 provides that charities already registered under the Charities Act Northern Ireland 2008, charities waiting to be called forward to register under that Act, and charities registered in either England and Wales or Scotland are eligible to be considered by the Health and Social Care Board to provide an independent guardian service in Northern Ireland. Section 21(5) of the Act requires the Department to make regulations in relation to the training and qualifications required for a person to be eligible for appointment as an independent guardian, and the support to be provided for and the supervision of an independent guardian post-appointment. The statutory rule specifies that in order to be eligible for appointment as an independent guardian, individuals must be qualified social workers with at least 5 years post-qualification experience of working with children and families, including direct work with children, court-related experience and interagency working. The statutory rule also provides that a charity which appoints a person to act as an independent guardian must provide or secure the provision of support to the independent guardian and make arrangements for the independent guardian to have access to formal supervision once per fortnight during the first 6 months of appointment and once per month thereafter. The statutory rule defines support as including administrative support, advice and assistance, as well as training and development that will enable the independent guardian to meet post-registration training and learning requirements set by the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Support also extends to enabling the independent guardian to achieve Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner Level 2 registration. The statutory rule also amends the Children's Homes Regulations, Northern Ireland 2005, to add independent guardians to the list of people to whom facilities within the children's home must be provided to enable any child accommodated in the home to meet privately with the independent guardian. Public consultation on the draft regulations ran from the 10th of September to the 6th of November 2015. A total of 18 responses were received. A summary of the responses received is provided in the SL1, and the full consultation report has also been shared with committee members. Taking on board comments received as part of the consultation process, the Department amended the draft regulations to increase the frequency of supervision to be provided to an independent guardian during the first 6 months of appointment. We also received some very useful suggestions about the additional knowledge, skills and experience which respondents considered would be necessary for an independent guardian to effectively undertake their role and responsibilities, and also suggestions about the training that should be undertaken for an independent guardian following appointment. While the primary legislation does not provide the Department with the necessary powers to include these in the regulations, the details have been shared with the Health and Social Care Board and will be considered for inclusion in the service specification, which will issue as part of the procurement process. Subject to committee agreement, the intention is to make the regulations before the dissolution of the Assembly, and they will come into operation 21 days later. This will allow the Health and Social Care Board to complete the procurement exercise and to appoint a charity. And that charity will then proceed to establish the service and appoint independent guardians. It's intended to have the service up and running by the end of 2016. Very happy to take questions from members.
Okay, thank you, Inish. In terms of the responses, you talked about 18 responses received, and that 56% of all respondents agreed that an independent guardian should have to be registered as a social worker, but 33% were of the view that that was quite prescriptive. The document that we have doesn't tell us who had concerns, which organisations had concerns.
You want to know exactly who had concerns, who wasn't supportive of the proposal. Carol, could you deal with that question, please?
Yeah, the role should not be restricted to social workers. Should be opened up to other professions. Would be Care and I, VOIPIC, Ncrc, Children's Law Centre, ECPAT, and Law Centre and I.
Okay, and then there was a percentage of people who didn't know, is that, or didn't have a view?
We're undecided.
We're undecided, yeah.
Okay. But I suppose you would accept that the organisations just listed have a huge, I suppose, voice in relation to this particular legislation and these regulations?
I accept that fully. I suppose maybe one of the things that we should do for you is to explain why the decision was made for the independent guardian to be a qualified social worker. And there were a number of things that we did look at, and I'm going to ask Paul to come in maybe in support of this, but we did look at the Scottish evaluation of its service, which actually identified that social work qualification was desirable. We also looked at the report on child trafficking advocates in England, which concluded that further consideration was required in relation to the certified training and qualifications of advocates. We also considered an FRA paper, that's the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, which considered that there was a necessity for expert knowledge and adequate training on a wide range of issues relating to welfare and child protection. And then finally, the Ncrc General Comment number 6, which I think the Children's Commissioner made specific reference to, which does recommend that a guardian or advisor should have the necessary expertise in the field of childcare, so as to ensure that the interests of the child are safeguarded and that the child's legal, social, health, psychological, material and educational needs are appropriately covered. Now, I think what we considered was taking all of that into account, that what people were describing was very much the business of social workers. So social workers are required under the Children Order to safeguard children and to promote their welfare. They also are required to undertake investigations where they have concerns that a child may not be properly safeguarded or their welfare is not being promoted, and then powers relating to taking children into care. So I think what I'm trying to say is that we consider that what others have described of the role of an independent guardian is very much in the territory of what social workers do on a day-to-day basis. Paul, do you want to add to that at all?
Yes, if I could. The paper that Irish referred to, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, one of its standards set by international and EU law pertaining to guardianship and representation of children is the necessity of expert knowledge and adequate training on a wide range of issues related to welfare and child protection specifically. We take a starting point that any child who is trafficked or potentially trafficked into the jurisdiction is a child at risk. They have already suffered abuse, they continue to be at risk of abuse, so it is a child protection matter, and Article 66 of the Children Order is immediately engaged by the trusts. That's their duty to investigate and cause inquiries to be made as to what risks and what they need to do to secure the children's welfare. The United Nations Convention on Children's Rights, the General Comment number 6, actually also advises that a guardian or advisor should have the necessary expertise in the field of childcare so as to ensure that the interests of the child are safeguarded and that the child's legal, social, health, psychological, material and educational needs are appropriately covered. Those are things that social workers in the Health and Social Care Trusts and in other agencies, voluntary agencies, would attend to as part of their overall training, and the statutory duty to ensure that is with the social workers in the trust. One of the concerns that we had was that the independent guardian will also have to engage in legal proceedings in respect of children who are trafficked. So you have a qualified social worker, a guardian ad litem who's appointed by the court, who also is required to be a qualified social worker. So in terms of the quality of the service, and also, if I can use the phrase, to ensure a quality of respect and a quality of arms and knowledge, we felt that the qualifications should be similar. One of the duties for the independent guardian is to ensure immediately that the child in question has independent legal representation. So there is not a conflict in terms of the professional role. Indeed, if anything, it's a wide safety net of professional knowledge, expertise and representation that's being put in place for those children.
Okay, good. Well, but I could maybe come at it from another angle. Why then would organisations such as the Children's Law Centre, VOIPIC, CareNI, Ncrc indicate that this is too prescriptive?
I presume, Chair, that they would want to widen the pool of personnel who could apply to be appointed as guardian, and also maybe the range of organisations that could apply to the health and social care board goes to procurement, whether it's by tender or contract. My presumption is that they would want to widen that field of applicants.
Okay, and just in relation to Scotland, I know that you had alluded to the social work qualification was identified as being desirable. So does that translate that independent guardians in Scotland have to be social workers?
It all depends, and my understanding is that Scotland is in the process of putting its service onto a statutory basis. Now, it will be interesting to see how that is reflected in legislation. I mean, some of the comments that came forward from people suggested that this is a function that might be, for example, vested in youth workers. I think that would be difficult to do. I mean, what we need to be able to do is to actually specify these individuals in legislation. Yes, you probably could define some of the other professions by way of legislation, but if you open it up to people like youth workers, for example, I think that would be very difficult to deal with by way of legislation.
But as it stands in Scotland, it's not mandatory.
Not at this stage. It will be interesting to see what they do when they place the service on a statutory basis.
Okay. I mean, from my own perception of this is hugely significant set of regulations. I certainly wouldn't be comfortable with processing or progressing these at this stage. There are huge sections of society reflected through these organisations who have raised issues, let's say, around the regulations, whose voice we haven't heard from to date.
The only other thing that I would add is, I mean, it will be a procured service. It will be procured for a period of years, probably around 3 years, and there will be the opportunity then after that period of 3 years to review the arrangements again.
We have a responsibility here in terms of our scrutiny role. A number of those organisations and many others that you have listed, we would seek views on all sorts of regulations. We haven't afforded them the opportunity to come in front of this committee to outline their rationale for their objections. So this is about the role of this committee, and it just doesn't sit right with me that this is almost coming in at the 11th hour and we're being asked to proceed as what's in front of us, and 33% of respondents who have a big stake in relation to this, and I'm not preempting the outcome of that, we haven't had the opportunity to hear from them. So I think Joanne had indicated this point. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you for your briefing? I think the Chair's largely outlined my views as well, and I just wanted to touch again, just so that I'm clear. Again, the responses to the 2 questions in the consultation regarding independent guardian, and you've outlined the groups, CareNI, VOIPIC, Children's Law Centre. I'm concerned on your rationale as to the independent guardian should be a social worker, and whether they should have that minimum 5 years social work experience and qualification. Are you not concerned that you are potentially ruling out someone who may have 10 years post-qualification experience working with children but aren't necessarily a social worker. I think your mind seems pretty made up, Eilish, but I'm, like the Chair, I'm concerned with that. You could potentially rule out someone with that vast experience.
What we've done is we've gone with the consensus view. So the majority of people who were asked the question, do you agree with...
That's 18 responses to a consultation?
18 responses, but the majority of those who responded were supportive of the independent guardian being a qualified social worker.
But some high-profile ones, as the Chair said, were...
I fully accept that also, but when we did take views from Health and Social Care trusts, who I think have are entitled to a view, the Health and Social Care Board likewise is supportive of the independent guardian being a qualified social worker, and I think they are also significant players whose views need to be taken into account. And we did look at other parts of the UK and what was happening there. So that is, I mean, what I'm trying to explain is the rationale for the decision to continue to specify the independent guardian as requiring to be a qualified social worker. I fully appreciate that you maybe have not got the views of other players like the Children's Commissioner or organisations like the Children's Law Centre. I fully accept that point.
Well, I think we haven't got the views of anybody.
No.
Yeah.
We haven't got the views of those who are saying it is the right thing to do and those who are saying that it's restrictive. That's I think the issue. Sorry, Joanne.
You're okay, Chair. So you're not concerned then, Eilish, that you are potentially ruling someone out with that expertise as well by stipulating that they have to...
I mean, I think qualified social workers are probably the best equipped to do the job. I'm not saying that others couldn't do it. One of my other concerns about delaying the making of the regulations is that we're already late with the delivery of the service. It should have been delivered in November of last year, and there are a number of reasons why that has not happened. If we don't make the regulations now, the service will be delayed even further, and that would be one of my other concerns.
So is the requirement to be a social worker with 5 years minimum experience consistent with the approach taken in other areas of the health service? You referred to Scotland and England, but would that be consistent with it?
It's a significant role. If that's your question, an independent guardian will be a significant person in the life of children, making and assisting them to make important decisions.
But in other areas in the health services, or
well, the more senior social workers, and again, Paul, I look to you to answer that question, but they would be the equivalent of principal practitioners.
Yes, and particularly given the child protection functions of this role, the independent guardian is charged to oversee and coordinate the efforts of all others who are involved in the child's life. And key to the area of child protection is understanding the statutory functions that are delegated to the Health and Social Care Trust. The guardian should have enough knowledge and experience to be able to recognise when a child's needs are being met, when they're not, and not only how to elaborate that, but how to challenge it. There's a function, there's an appropriate challenge function for the independent guardian to hold to account all other parties who are providing services to improve outcomes for that child. One of the comments that did come back, Chair, that I should have maybe reflected in my previous answer was one of the concerns that was expressed by one of the organisations was that the requirement that the independent guardian would be a social worker would reduce the independence of the role. But to further answer your question, that's not actually true, because we have social workers who are employed in voluntary and community organisations such as the NSPCC, Bernardo's, Action for Children, who actually not only contribute services, but they are advocating and lobbying organisations that do fulfil a function of holding the system to account as well. So the legal duty that's on the guardian to represent the best interests of the child, combined with that independence, the independence of the employing organisation, who will have their own policies, procedures, and as Eilish says, their commitment is to contribute in a collaborative, cooperative way with the Health and Social Care Board by way of that tender or contract. I'm sure that the board will write in what the expectations are in terms of the board's oversight and performance management and monitoring of that contract and the service delivery.
You seem fairly convinced. Just finally to clarify, there's no requirement for that person to have had any experience with trafficked children?
No, currently there isn't, because the numbers of trafficked children that we have in Northern Ireland, certainly comparative to the rest of the UK, has been small. That does not mean that we're in any way less concerned about this issue. And in fact, the Health and Social Care Board has established a regional practice network that has the involvement of the other statutory and some of the voluntary organisations that actually leads practice. So I wouldn't have that concern.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. And Rosie?
Can I ask about the financial implications? You talk about 100,000 in year one, and then it says rising to 160,000 in year two, and then I'm presuming it's a misprint or a typo. It says rising to 240,000 in year two as well. I take it, does that mean year three?
Year three, that should read. Apologies for that.
Can you tell me how those figures are arrived at?
Again, there was some reference made to the Scottish service, so I think the ratio of guardian to separated or trafficked children in Scotland is of the order of 1 to 12, so one guardian will be allocated to 12 children by way of the Scottish service. The projections are that there will be between 10 or 12 children in each of those years who will require the services of a guardian, and the funding has been calculated, funding requirement has been calculated accordingly.
Okay, and currently how many children would come under the service that this guardian would be taking care of?
So it is estimated within year one, for example, there will be between 10 and 12 children who require the services of a guardian.
How many are there currently? Obviously, there's children coming to the attention who may be trafficked or may. The kind of children who would be covered by this guardian?
Well, I'll give you one example. In 2014, for example, there were 45 referrals to the National Referral Mechanism. Now, 8 of those referrals related to children. So that was in 2014. I think
were they trafficked?
Separated or potentially trafficked. So this legislation not only covers trafficked children, it also covers separated children. So I think the 10 to 12 figure per year is based on what we know in Northern Ireland terms. It's also based on the Scottish service, which has allocated one guardian to 12 children. So it's a combination of both of those things. The numbers who we are aware of in Northern Ireland, either separated or trafficked children, and how the Scottish service has actually operated.
So you expect then those figures to rise year on year?
The thing is that the year one children will not go away, so a guardian may be with those children for a period of years. The legislation enables a guardian to stay connected with a child up until age 21, if that's what the child or young person wants and requires. So year one, a guardian may be dealing with 10 to 12 children. In year two, that 10 to 12 children will not have gone away, and there will be a new cohort potentially added to that, which requires you to appoint a second guardian, and then that is repeated in year three, requiring the appointment then of a third guardian.
Right, okay, so but initially in the first year there will be one guardian?
One guardian initially, and the number will grow.
Right, okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Kieran?
Yeah, Chair, just following on. You know, if the independent guardians are to be restricted to the professional social workers only, do you reckon that they have the capacity to carry out that work despite all the heavy work pressures that's on the professional social workers? Are you any concerns that they may not be able to come up to doing the job that you're asking them to do?
But this will be the person will actually be employed by a charity, so it sits very separate from the health and social care system, and they will be employed specifically to undertake that role. So there should not be any, assuming we've got our projections right, I think is an important point, there should not be any capacity issues. And if we've got our projections wrong, then clearly more guardians would require to be appointed, employed by the charity to undertake the role.
And they still would be professional social workers?
Absolutely, yeah.
May I add, that was part of the consideration about the 5-year post-qualification experience and experience in childcare and child protection matters, so that the appointees to the post would have the necessary knowledge, the training accumulated over at least that period, but also an understanding of the nature of the work and the resilience to continue within that. So if your question was the possibility of the social workers appointed not coming up to the task, that was why we put in the 5 years post-qualification and the supervision requirements from the organisation that employs the workers.
Yeah, that's good, but it's the volume of work they may be asked to do. Have they the capacity to do it the way it should be done?
If our projections are correct, okay, and they are based on a Scottish service which has operated since 2010, they should have sufficient capacity to deal with that number of children.
Okay.
If it's helpful, Chair, as well, the Health and Social Care Board has indicated that as part of its procurement, it will intend in the first year to monitor and review the service to ensure that it actually is meeting the expectation of it.
Right, okay, that's fine. That's grand.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Okay, well, for that, I mean, I have to say I'm not convinced, given the, I suppose, lack of detail of what we have in front of us today, that we can proceed at this stage. We do have, 56 of people saying this was the right way to proceed, but 33% saying that it was quite restrictive. And certainly in terms of our role, and I've listened, Eilish, to what you said in terms of delaying a process, but it has been our role to bring it to the last committee meeting of the mandate. It certainly would be my recommendation that we would take this back and bring it back in to allow proper scrutiny, to allow those voices who are in favour of this regulation and those who aren't sure, to have their voice in the system. So I'm recommending, members, that we do that and we bring that back post-election. Members in agreement?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, members, I just want to seek agreement as well to bring in a number of other statutory rules, just to add them on to today's agenda, to deal with just in terms of legislative timescales. Legislative items before our briefings on the Muller and Dublin Hospital and the breast cancer referral rates. So have I got that agreement, first of all, to do that, to just bring those forward on the agenda?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Item 5 then is a departmental briefing on SL1, and we're just waiting to our top table change around. It's the foster placement and fostering agencies regulations and the regulation of Quality Improvement Authority, regulations 2016. Departmental officials are apparently here to brief the committee, which are at items 14 and 15 in your tabled pack. Just to refer members also to pages 54 to 161 of the table pack for the relevant papers. So I'm just waiting until our the conflict finishes. Big turnaround. Again, you're welcome back. We also have Ms. Frances Nicholson, Office of Social Services at the Department, and Ms. Elaine Lawson, Head of Looked After Children and Adoption Policy at the Department. So I'm just going to invite yourself to make the opening remarks, and we'll open it up to questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the second opportunity this afternoon to provide the committee with a briefing on the draft foster placement and fostering agencies regulations. You've been provided with the SL1 notification and also a copy of the summary report of responses to the consultation on the draft regs, which details the views of key stakeholders and the Department's response to them. At the 31st of March 2015, there were 2,875 looked after children in Northern Ireland, with 76% of those children being cared for in foster care placements. The Department recognises the invaluable service that foster parents provide, and we also recognise the need to ensure that our fostering legislation supports both foster parents and children in foster care. The current foster placement regulations, which were brought forward in 1996, have been in place for 20 years. And the new foster placement and fostering agencies regulations will revoke and replace the current regulations. One of the main changes which the regulations will make is that they will enable independent fostering agencies to approve foster parents once they've been assessed, which under the existing 1996 regulations can only currently be carried out by health and social care trusts and voluntary organisations which have been approved for that purpose. In practice, this can create delays in approving independent agency foster parents because existing regulations require foster parents to be approved by health and social care trusts. And this means that foster carers are approved twice, once by fostering agencies and then by health and social care trusts. The new regulations will therefore bring all fostering agencies, both in the independent and in the voluntary sector, within the scope of registration and inspection by the RQIA. Health and social care trusts also provide statutory fostering services, and their fostering functions include the placement of children with foster carers and the monitoring and review of those placements. Trusts also undertake looked after children reviews, which extend to children in foster care. The Trust's statutory functions as they relate to looked after children are subject to a system of performance monitoring and review. They report annually on the exercise of their statutory functions to the Health and Social Care Board, and as well as receiving an annual Delegated Statutory Functions overview report from the Health and Social Care Board, which relates to the performance of the Trust. The Department also receives an interim 6-monthly corporate parenting report from the Health and Social Care Board, and both reports are subject to scrutiny by the Department. When developing the fostering regulations, there were some concerns expressed about fostering agencies being treated differently from trusts fostering services, in the sense that one is required to register with the RQIA and the other is not. And in response to those concerns, the Department has made it clear that trust fostering functions are different from those of fostering agencies. They are subject to a system of routine monitoring and reporting, and can be and have been subject to review by the RQIA under Article 35 of the 2003 order. It was on this basis that the Department commissioned a review of statutory fostering services by the RQIA, which reported at the end of 2013. And whilst a range of recommendations were made, the review team found that in general, trusts had well planned and organised foster care services to meet the assessed needs of looked after children. Overall, the quality of foster care was good, and carers were generally positive about the way agencies prepare, assess and support them for this role. The review also found that systems were in place for supervision and appraisal of staff, and foster care panels including foster carers with a wide range of knowledge and experience. In addition to the powers provided at Article 35 of the 2003 order for the RQIA to conduct reviews and inspections of statutory fostering services, Article 38 of the 2003 order also provides that the Department may prepare and publish statements of minimum standards. And I can advise the committee that it is intended, when published, minimum care standards for fostering services will have some application to both the independent and voluntary providers and to statutory providers. Therefore, in addition to regulating independent and voluntary fostering agencies, the RQIA will review, as required, and report on the delivery of statutory fostering services against relevant minimum care standards. It's therefore our view that the requirement for independent and voluntary fostering agencies to be registered with the RQIA and to be subject to inspection will bring them under the appropriate level of scrutiny and assurance, albeit with less regular reporting and scrutiny than that relating to the statutory sector. And that is appropriate given that a trust is the corporate parent of a looked after child. At this point, I draw your attention to the associated draft regulation and quality improvement authority fees and frequency of inspections, registration, amendment regulations, Northern Ireland 2016. The intention as outlined in these draft regulations is that independent and voluntary fostering agencies will be inspected by the RQIA a minimum of once in every 3 years. This mirrors the frequency of inspection of voluntary adoption agencies, which were brought under regulation by the RQIA in 2010, and which are similar in their make-up to fostering agencies. The draft fees and frequency of inspections regulations also propose a nil fee charge on fostering agencies for registration with the RQIA, and this is in keeping with all other establishments and agencies which since 2007 have been subject to registration under the 2003 order. And the Department is currently carrying out a review of the current fee and charging and frequency of inspections across the whole of the regulated sector, and this will be subject to consultation. In addition, fostering agencies which are currently operating in Northern Ireland will have a 6-month period within which to register with the RQIA. Turning to the fostering regulations consultation process, public consultation ran from the 13th of January to the 7th of April. We received 19 responses, which were largely supportive of the regulations. The Department has taken account of comments insofar as we consider it possible to do so in consultation with legal advisors. We provided you with a list of respondents and a table showing the detailed consultation responses and the departmental replies to those responses with the SL1, and these will be published on the Department's website. A number of amendments requested by consultees were considered by the Department to be inappropriate for inclusion at the level of subordinate legislation, and it is intended that these issues will be covered either in guidance or in minimum care standards, which will support the regulations. In addition, consultees also requested a number of amendments which would require primary legislation to deliver. Turning now to major issues raised by respondents to consultation. 5 of the 19 respondents asked for clarification on the inspection of statutory fostering services or expressed concerns for them not to be regulated in the same way as fostering agencies, and that would create a 2-tier system, and I think I've already addressed that point. 3 respondents considered that the requirement in the regulations to have a written agreement between the Trust and the fostering agency setting out the services to be provided by the agency to the Trust was an unnecessary bureaucracy. And these organisations also advised that they could find no similar provision in the equivalent English or Scottish regulations. Respondents also questioned the appropriateness of an agreement to be made with the Trust on the basis that the Trusts also provide fostering services, and there was a suggestion that the agreement should actually be with the Health and Social Care Board. We can advise that the same written agreement requirement applies in English and Scottish regulations. We've consulted further with the Health and Social Care Board and have concluded that the Trust is the appropriate body to put the agreement in place with fostering agencies. The Trust is the corporate parent and is responsible for the placement of children into foster care. Just under half of the respondents were concerned about the absence of a specific process for the approval of foster parents by a foster panel. The Department's lawyers have confirmed that we do not have the primary powers to prescribe for fostering panels in draft regulations, and likewise the introduction of an independent review mechanism would require primary legislation. The regulations require a trust social worker to visit children in a foster placement at least once a month. And some respondents to the consultation sought more flexibility, particularly in circumstances where foster placements are stable and long-term. In England, visits are undertaken every 6 months for long-term foster placements after the first year of placement. However, consultation in Northern Ireland with children and young people on the draft regulations showed mixed views, where a significant number of children consulted, around 33% of them, did not agree to visiting and being reduced for placements which lasted for more than a year. Research also points to relationship stability as an important factor for looked after children, and having taken professional advice and after further consultation with the Health and Social Care Board, the Department has decided that monthly visits remain important, as longer periods between visits would make it difficult for a social worker to build up and maintain a relationship with the child. Just under half of the respondents expressed concerns that the regulations require police checks on children under the age of 10 who were living in the household of a prospective foster parent. Regulation 53A requires the fostering service provider to consider not only whether the prospective foster parent is suitable to undertake the role, but also whether the prospective foster parent's household is suitable for the child. This has been the subject of consultation by the Department of Justice following a review of the criminal record disclosure system by Sunita Mason, and that review concluded that criminal records checks should continue for those under age 16 living in households of those undertaking home-based occupations, and that would extend to foster care, and on that basis the Department intends to retain this provision. 2 independent and voluntary organisations and 1 statutory organisation raised concerns about perceived negative impact on children with disabilities arising out of Regulation 12. Regulation 12 replicates in full the provisions of Regulation 9 of the current 96 regulations. The regulation sets out the circumstances in which a child who is placed in a planned series of short-term placements with a foster parent, for example for respite purposes, can have their series of placements treated as a single placement for the purposes of reducing the regularity of visits to the child. And this regulation has been interpreted in the past as requiring a child to move placement because, for example, the 90 days time scale in the regulation was viewed as a limit on the placement. We've clarified in the response to consultation that the criteria set out in Regulation 12.1 should not be read as a cap on the amount of short break care permitted, and the level of care provided should be based on an assessment of the needs of the individual child concerned. However, if at any point it's assessed that the short break care for a child should extend beyond the criteria set out in Regulation 12.1, there is no difficulty in the placement being extended. However, in those circumstances, there will be no easement in terms of visiting requirements. Normal visiting and review arrangements for a looked-after child will apply. We consider this to be appropriate, and it's for the relevant trust to determine the quantum of short break care that would be in the child's best interests. Just under half of the respondents raised concerns about Regulation 11's provision for a trust to remove the child forthwith from a placement where it appears to the trust that the continuation of the placement would be detrimental to the welfare of the child, and it was considered that this should be caveated by a reference to the child being at risk of significant harm. This regulation is consistent with regulation in the 1996 regulations, and while we have amended the term forthwith to immediately, and we still consider that where continuation of a placement appears to a trust to be detrimental to the welfare of the child, then the placement must be terminated with immediate effect. However, generally it is expected that placements will be ended in a planned way, and it's intended that the fostering standards will be developed, will cover these issues in more detail. There are a number of other key issues that I was going to take you through. If you want me to continue, I will, Chair. But I will say that in terms of the number of amendments made in response to consultation, we have changed the wording of the draft regulations in around 25 areas. And further amendments were made on the basis of further legal advice which we sought. The draft regulations also take account of comments received from the Departments of Justice and Enterprise, Trade and Investment, following requests for them to consider the cross-cutting issues in the regulations affecting their departments, and amendments have been made relating to both bankruptcy and provision and police checks. Minister Hamilton issued a letter to ministerial colleagues on the 3rd of March stating his intention to make the fostering regulations and to submit these to the committee for its clearance. Subject to the agreement of the committee, the intention is to make the regulations before the dissolution of the Assembly and to bring them into operation 21 days later.
Okay.
I'm very happy to take questions from them.
And again, I suppose unless we've had the opportunity to go through all of that detail that you've produced there, it's very difficult to actually track some of the changes from the consultation to this point. But I suppose it would be useful if you give us a sense of even the 5 organisations that you referred to who had raised issues with what was being proposed, who they were even.
Raised issues in connection with what exactly?
Proceeding with the regulations.
I don't think there were any organisations not supportive of us not proceeding with the
the difficulty
regulations.
is we don't have a detailed analysis here of the consultation process.
I think there was one key issue, and I've dealt with it in the opening statement, and it happened. The issue was raised very early on in the process of both engagement with agencies, and indeed repeated in the consultation, and that was the creation of what they perceived to be a two-tier system. Fostering agencies being subject to inspection and
Well, you also referred to the fact that some organisations said raised the issues about how similar it was to England and Wales. You also raised the issue about impact for children with disabilities. You raised there was a number of issues raised in your presentation. It's more than just a two-tier system.
And in response to some of those issues, so for example, using the example of the agreement that a trust will be required to put in place with fostering agencies, there was a misapprehension that we were imposing something in Northern Ireland that was different from the arrangements in other parts of the UK. And it was a misapprehension when we looked at English and Scottish regulations. Exactly the same arrangement is in place. Well, one thing that I will say is the fostering agencies who will be impacted, possibly greatest by these regulations, and there are only 4 of them in Northern Ireland. They are very welcoming of the introduction.
So who are they?
There are
So we have Bernardo's, we have Action for Children, Kindercare and Foster Care Associates. They are already all operating, but obviously they're not regulated under RQIA. And when they're approving their foster carers, those have to come to fostering panels that are really run by the trusts. So they're having to go to 2 panels at this stage.
So Bernardo's, Action for Children, is it Kinship Care?
Kindercare,
Kindercare, and what was the 4th one?
Foster Care Associates.
So all of these organisations, when you said most of the responses were largely supportive, these organisations
Are supportive.
they're very welcoming of the
regulations.
introduction of the regulations. And I had a conversation with Fostering Network today that has been acting on behalf of all of those organisations, and they were very pleased to see the regulations actually appearing before committee.
It wasn't in relation to bringing in the regulations. In the main, it was some small parts of the regulations. So it was different people in relation to different regulations. But
okay,
overall,
but the point that I'm making here is in terms of the role of this committee.
Yeah.
And as it stands, we do not have a detailed analysis of that consultation process.
We have provided you with a summary
We
of the
haven't
responses.
had the opportunity to listen to those who are largely supportive of the regulations going forward, or those individuals who may have issues.
I'm just simply going to repeat myself. The majority of those who responded to consultation were supportive of what the regulations are intending to achieve, and the fostering agencies, who are the agencies who will be most impacted by the regulations, in the sense that they will be subject to registration and inspection by the RQIA, and they are not currently subject to registration and inspection by the RQIA. They are particularly welcoming of the introduction of the regulations.
Let me try this a different way then. There's 48 regulations in this and 7 schedules.
Yeah.
And we're being asked to agree this to proceed as a tabled item for today, the last committee of the mandate.
I mean, it has taken us some time to get to this point. And we have, throughout this process, I mean, we engaged, did not only undertake consultation, we went through an engagement process where we established a group where all of the agencies were represented. We undertook an exercise involving foster carers, foster children. So, I mean, we have gone through a fairly significant process of engagement and consultation. And the outcome of all of that is that people are generally supportive of what it is the department is trying to do.
The outcome of all of that for us is, first of all, the consultation ended in April 2014.
And it has taken, there are a number of reasons why it has taken us to this time to get the regulations to committee. While there were small numbers of responses, those responses were very detailed in nature. It did require us to consult fairly significantly with the department's lawyers again. And there were some issues with the capacity of the RQIA to undertake inspection of these agencies.
2 years from a consultation ends on a significantly important issue to come to the last committee of the mandate with a tabled item that has 48 regulations and 7 schedules, a number of organisations largely supportive, but some who have raised quite significant issues. And we're being asked to proceed on that basis. I mean, I just don't think it's acceptable. There was no Fergal had indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the process arguments that have been made, and I do tend to share those in the wider sense. And I don't know the mind of the committee, but I do understand that there is a need here to extend capacity around foster care. There are significant numbers of children who are fostered here, and significant more numbers of them who are moved substantially and frequently in their short lives before they leave the system again. And I think there is a need to think about how we can expand the capacity here in terms of allowing other organisations. I think it makes sense that other organisations have the capacity to vet, if you like, foster parents, and the fact that they be brought in then separately under the RQIA model. So I just make those points. There is a need here that the committee has to consider, and I think we need to look back at what the intent is here in terms of the SL1 and the direction of travel. I think it's important to make those points.
The points are well made, and I think they would be shared. I can't speak for all of the committee, but I think they'd be shared in terms of the importance of the whole area of fostering and regulations. There's no doubt about that. But I suppose my specific issues are in relation to the role of the committee.
I understand.
And, I really reiterate, I don't think it's appropriate that the last committee of the mandate, as a tabled item, are presented with a huge, effectively, if you talk about 48 regulations and 6 schedules, it could be a bill. And it's something that's come at us effectively at the 11th hour.
One thing that I will add to that is that the regulations replicate 1996 regulations. So what you've got in front of you are not all entirely new regulations. So we've gone through a process of consolidation also.
But again, the committee has not been able to arrive at that view because of the lack of our ability to scrutinise this regulation at this stage.
Could I just add one other comment, Chair, with your permission? There isn't large dissent at all from those that are involved, and unlike the previous issue, whereas we have here people who have consulted but have been largely in favour. And I understand, I've looked at the explanatory tables, etc., and any mitigations, but if we were facing large percentage of dissent from those involved, then I think there would be a greater argument. I don't disagree with, and I made this point in another committee about late business and the potential for a committee to miss something as a result of that. But I think those other wider points have to be made.
Yeah, and I think they're listened to. Members, suggesting that we send this regulation back until post-election. I think it's too big a piece of regulation to not apply our proper scrutiny, and I think we will be failing in our responsibility. I think you've heard clearly how people's sense of the importance of getting this right, but to date we haven't been able to test that in any shape, form or fashion. So I'm seeking agreement, members, that we return to this post-election. Thank you. Okay, members, moving on to the next item, which is item 6, It's a statutory rule recovery of health service charges, amounts, amendments and its regulations 2016. It's at page 64 and 73 of your meeting pack. Just to remind members that the committee considered and approved the SL1 for the rule at our meeting on the 2nd of March, and there's been no changes to policy content since the SL1 was submitted, and the Examiner of Statutory Rules has yet to report on the statutory rule. So are members content with the statutory rule, subject obviously to the Examiner's report?
Right.
Okay. Therefore, I put the motion that the Committee for Health, Social Services and Public Safety has considered the recovery of health services charges, amounts, amendments, regulations 2016 and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Item 7 is another statutory rule, the Tobacco Retailer Registration and Display of Notices, Regulations 2016. The papers are at page 30 to 42 of your tabled pack. Again, we had considered and approved the SL1 for the rule at our meeting on the 27th of January 2016. There's been no changes to the policy content, and the Examiner of Statutory Rules has yet to report. So are members content with the statutory rule, subject to the Examiner's report? Therefore, the Committee for Health, Social Services and Public Safety has considered the Tobacco Retailer Registration and Display of Notices, Regulations 2016, and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Item 8 is another statutory rule, the Tobacco Retailer Fixed Penalty General Regulations 2016, pages 44 to 52 of your tabled pack. Again, we had considered and approved the SL1 for this rule at our meeting on the 27th of January 2016. There's been no changes to the policy content, and the Examiner of Statutory Rules has yet to report. So are members content with the statutory rule, subject to Examiner's report?
Right.
Therefore, I'll put the motion the Committee for Health, Social Services and Public Safety has considered the Tobacco Retailer Regulations 2016 and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules.
Right.
Item 9 is an SL1, the Pharmaceutical Society General Amendment Regulations 2016. It's pages 74 to 77 of your meeting pack. The Department is proposing to make a statutory rule to increase the fees to be charged to pharmaceutical chemists and students under the Pharmaceutical Society of Northern Ireland General Regulations 1994. And the rule is subject to negative resolution. So are members content that the Department makes the statutory rule?
Right.
Item 10 is the General Dental Services Regulations. The relevant papers are on your tables, and the Department is proposing to make a statutory rule in conjunction with the Department of Finance and Personnel to amend the General Dental Services Regulations 1993 by making a minor consequential amendment to the principal regulations to ensure they reflect the new numbering of determinations relating to matters set out in the Statement of Dental Remuneration following the ceasing of commitment payments to general dental practitioners from the 1st of April. And the rule will be subject to negative resolution. Are members content that the Department makes the statutory rule again, or whether they wish to bring the SL1 back following the elections for more detailed scrutiny by the newly established committee? Do members have a view? Are members content? I think again, there was, I suppose, the lateness of this being delivered to us. I think it was only, I'm looking to the clerk, it was only 11 o'clock this morning. We can proceed, but I'm going to look to the clerk to maybe give a bit of background.
Chair, I suppose I would just draw members' attention to the paragraph describing the consultation. Usually in an SL1, the committee would expect the department to report on the outcome of the consultation, which organisations supported the rule, which were against it, maybe what the key issues were. This simply says that the department consulted with the British Dental Association, but there's no inkling of what the BDA's view is on this issue. this rule is connected to the ceasing of the commitment payments being made to dentists. So I suppose I'm simply pointing out it's that issue of the commitment payments is probably a fairly significant issue to dentists, and this SL1 doesn't actually explain or give a sense of what the British Dental Association's view is on this rule, of whether they are supportive of it or whether they're opposed to it.
Okay, are members content then that we would bring this back post-election, given that we don't have a sense of what the issues were? Or members?
Chair, yes, it would be important to hear their views.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that, members. Then moving on to the departmental briefing on the Mother and Children's Hospital. We have departmental officials here today to brief us. The relevant papers are at pages 51 to 56 of your meeting pack. You're very welcome. Thank you for attending today. We have Bill Pauly, who is Director of Infrastructure and Investment at the Department, and Mr Martin Dillon, Deputy Chief Executive, the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust. Not sure who's taken the lead, of Bill, yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, but just invite you to make your opening presentation. We'll open up to comments and questions.
Very briefly, Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Just two very brief comments. As you say, I'm the Investment Director in the Department, and the role here really is to cover some of the budgetary issues that surround this project for us. And Martin, Deputy Chief in the Trust, as you say, but he's also the Senior Responsible Officer for the delivery of this project in terms of its governance arrangements, and can lead from that. Other point really is just to say that we've provided a short briefing paper that hopefully has been useful to the committee. It's a joint effort between us, and really, rather than go through it and read it out to you again, I would be happy just that we would move to take any questions the committee might have.
Okay, that's music to our ears. Thank you for that. Okay, could I maybe start? The outline business case in terms of the Mother and Children's Hospital or Regional Children's Hospital was approved in February 2014. Is that the right time scale? Okay.
Yeah.
And the capital cost was 219 million.
Mm-hmm.
What are the revenue consequences? I'm assuming that the revenue consequences year by year, in terms of you know, there's usually extra revenue costs as projects develop. Is there an oversight of that or a view of that, of revenue?
I haven't got an oversight of that or the extent of that at this minute in time. That would be something that the Trust will engage with the Board with as we look at the delivery of services closer to the time that the building would be commissioned. There would have been some material in the business case as traditional to do that, and I can update you on those elements.
So we know that we're talking about 219 million for capital, but we don't know revenue.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, the additional revenue costs associated with the increased footprint have been identified in the outline business case, and we have a letter of Commissioner support in relation to that. Those revenue costs relate to the current service models, not to any new or future service models, which would be our service developments or enhancements to the service, which would be a whole separate discussion. But the increased revenue costs associated with the increased footprint and the new size and scale of the new hospital have been captured in the outline business case.
So revenue is based on what we're currently doing, is that?
The additional revenue costs in terms of additional rates, heat, light and power, things like that have been identified, but nothing to do with the new models of care, which would be a separate discussion with the Commissioners or whatever new arrangements follow on the Commissioners in the future.
Yeah, because I mean, I assume that would include issues like extra nurses,
Indeed.
to staff rooms, even right through to cleaning staff?
Indeed, we're moving to a situation at the moment where we have 31 single rooms to a situation where we will have 124 single rooms, each with a pull-down bed for a parent or carer, and clearly there will be implications for the nursing workforce.
And well, given you're talking about the new model of care, you know, what stage are we at there in relation to those projections?
Well, in terms of the clinical brief phase of the exercise has been completed. So there's been an extensive phase of engagement with clinicians over recent 6 months. And that has been looking at how it is we currently do things, how we might do things differently in a new regional children's hospital, which is to serve the children of Northern Ireland for 50 years to come when it's opened. And we had the benefit of the fact that 3 or 4 of our consultant paediatricians have recently been in Australia or the USA and are familiar with new models of care or different ways of doing things. So they've begun to factor that thinking into the clinical brief, which in turn will now influence the clinical design of the building. And that particular phase is just underway.
And is there a time scale on that clinical brief being completed?
The clinical brief is now complete and signed off after extensive engagement with all the relevant clinicians. They have expressed themselves content with that brief and the design that will now flow from that. We've actually now moved into the detailed design phase of the project. We're almost on a room-by-room basis. We'll be deciding where the plugs go, where the bedhead services go, into that level of detail in this new phase now, Chairman.
But sorry, just excuse me if I'm coming at this from a different angle, but if we've moved on to the more detailed design phase, but we still don't know what the new model of care will cost in relation to revenue, I'm not sure why that's missing.
The clinical design, the clinical brief is finished. We're now into design. There has been early thinking around the new models of care, and right throughout this process there will be separate discussions with either commissioners of the department in relation to what the new models of care might mean for future revenue consequences. But at the moment, the outline business case has the additional revenue consequence associated with the additional footprint and so on of the new hospital.
Okay, so those conversations will continue.
Indeed.
Do we have a cut-off point for that? Then do we have a definitive for the absolute costing on a new model of care?
We will not know that definitively until after we finish the detailed design process, and even after that, discussions will be ongoing. Because in terms of the overall timetable for this project, assuming we get the new building handed over to us in December 2021, there will still be a good 6 or 9 months of intensive commissioning thereafter. So you can see that there is plenty of room for these discussions to continue.
Is it envisaged that this new regional facility will be the specialist perinatal care facility that's so desperately needed? Or is this something very different?
In terms of?
In terms of a specialist unit for mother and children, for mother and child?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but we hope to have on site this April.
Well, let me maybe put this slightly differently then. There are increasingly concerns around access to specialist service for women who suffer sometimes prenatal, sometimes postnatal depression, and it impacts on mental health. Very, very stark figures in relation to that, and we don't have a specialist unit anywhere on the island, in fact, where mother and child can be treated.
Indeed, I understand the question.
I'm just trying to
Chairman.
get the thinking around
Absolutely.
this.
Well, we hope to have on site this April or May the main contractor for the new acute mental health hospital on the Belfast City Hospital site, which will be an 80-bedded facility. Now, the original business case for that development made provision for a phase 2 development, and we have reserved site that will facilitate a mother and baby unit if that is commissioned in the future. So site is reserved on the Belfast City Hospital site alongside the new acute mental health unit that will be built there.
So the site is reserved for that?
It is.
So what you're talking here in terms of mother and children is very different?
Indeed.
Just to be very clear on that, because I know the Minister, in answer to a question in the Assembly the other day, seemed to be linking the need for perinatal specialist services to this proposed development, but you're indicating are different?
Well, what I can say is that in the original business case for the acute mental health unit, there was provision made for a phase 2 development which would incorporate a mother and baby unit if such a thing were commissioned or specified in the future, and a portion of site has been reserved for such a facility if it is needed in the future.
Okay, just in terms then of capacity for the Mother and Children's Hospital, the report that we've seen talks about 155 inpatient beds, 48 day case beds and 10 theatres. How does that compare to current provision?
Well, I can give you a sense of the from to the to, Chairman. So as you say, we currently have 97 inpatient or day case beds, and that will grow to 155 in the new facility. Of the 155, 124 will be single rooms with pull-down beds or sleeping accommodation for parents or carers. We currently have 3 theatres, although we use some adult ENT, and we use theatres in Musgrave Park for paediatric orthopaedics, and that will grow to 10 theatres in the new facility. We currently have 12 paediatric ICU beds. That will grow to 26 in the new facility, including high dependency unit. At the moment, we accommodate about 30,000 emergency department attendances at the Children's Hospital. The new hospital will make provision for up to 45,000 attendances per year. We currently accommodate 50,000 outpatient attendances. In the new hospital, we've made provision for 53,000, but that also factors into, that takes account of the fact that some of the outpatient service may in the future be provided in community or health and wellbeing centre provision. In relation to elective activity, in the current hospital deals with children up to their 13th birthday. In the new hospital, will be up to their 16th birthday. And at the moment, the emergency department deals with children up to their 14th birthday, and in the new hospital, that could be up to their 16th birthday. And both have been sized for up to 18-year-olds, should provision need to be made for that in the future.
Okay, so from 97 inpatient beds to 155, and from 3 theatres to 10, and from, did you say 30,000? 30,000
emergency department attendances, provision in the new building for
Up to
to accommodate up to
45,000.
45,000.
Okay, so do you envisage then that there's going to be higher levels of bed occupancy, or shorter length of stay, or just trying to get a sense of how the figures are being projected?
Yes, the basis for the 155 beds was based on current assessment need, demographic change, future projections, and those in fact figures were driven by the Health and Social Care Board in terms of its assessment of future need. Given that when this hospital is built, it will need to serve a generation of children for about 50 years to come.
Do you envisage that there will be capacity or even spare capacity to actually allow waiting lists to come down?
Certainly, given that we will be going up to 10 theatres, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you for your briefing? And this certainly is exciting news for the future of paediatric care in Northern Ireland, especially in conjunction with the new children's unit in Craigavon Area Hospital as well, which is due to start. I've had some considerable experience of the children's hospital from my son was 5 weeks old, and I do remember trying to sleep on a chair beside his bed along with so many other parents. So this certainly, when you're in that situation and you have a seriously ill child, this would be very, very welcome. Can I ask then what changes are planned or made possible with the linkage with regional hospitals, children's hospitals? What plans have you in place with that to connect with, for example, the new Children's Hospital Craigavon?
The usual arrangements around the paediatric network will apply. Other than that, I'm not aware of any specific arrangements other than the normal transfer and other arrangements that would apply through the paediatric network.
I take it you've been in consultation, because when you're transferred from a regional hospital with a sick child down to the Royal, it's very, very daunting. I'm sure you have. Have you thought through those links, how that will sort of seamless when when your child is moved.
Indeed.
To
All
the
of that
Royal?
has been thought through in terms of the clinical brief,
So just in terms of clinical brief, okay.
taking account of all of those factors as we went
Okay.
through that, yeah.
Okay. I know the Chair's touched on this, but I'd like maybe some clarity around the budget allocation for the new hospital of the 16 million. How is expected to be spent, that break-up with it?
Of the 16 million for 16-17?
Yes, 16-17 budget allocation.
I don't know, Bill, if you have the full breakdown of the 16 million, but given that we're now in the design phase, a lot of that will be on design fees for the design team and the enabling works that's currently underway.
Do you have a breakdown of it?
Yes, well, in paragraph 16-17, there's approximately 10 million of that would be in terms of what would be specifically the Regional Children's Hospital element of it, and then in the enabling works alongside the Royal Maternity Hospital project is about 4.5 to 5 million, and there's about 1 million of that 16 that will be on the first stages of the Energy Centre project. These projects are all on the same site, obviously, and there's linkages between them. At this stage, it's the enabling works on the site and a lot of the underground and ducting work that is necessary there will relate to both the maternity build project and the children's hospital that are beside each other in the site, and as such those budgetary elements are making up the 16 million that we plan to spend next year.
Okay, I'm pleased to see that you have taken best practice ideas from across the country, and you referred to it, USA and Australia. Can you give us then some examples of those specific new ideas which will be incorporated or are being considered?
And in addition to what I've already said, the design team, a senior clinician and members of the project team went across to America last year, and they visited children's hospitals in Boston, Chicago, San Francisco and Seattle. Very recently, members of the team have been across to Liverpool and to Glasgow to see these new state-of-the-art children's hospitals and to look at the models of care, and whatever learning we can take from that, we're bringing back.
Is there anything specific that will be incorporated in our new hospital from those visits that you can tell us about?
No, I need to come back to you on that in terms of some of the specific learning. Yes, absolutely.
Find out that best practice. Can I thank you? This is certainly one the new committee will be watching with interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And Kieran?
Yeah, Chair, thanks very much. I'm a bit interested in the outline business case, which was approved back in 2014 at a capital cost of 219 million. How certain are you that that capital will, well, it'll be obviously by the time 2021 comes along, it'll have risen by quite a substantial amount. How satisfied are you, confident are you that the funding will be available to do the plans that you've set out? And I very much welcome what's in front of us here, absolutely, but it's a concern that we all know how difficult it is at this moment in time for to fund the National Health Service in Northern Ireland. How satisfied are you that this money will be available to help you to fulfil your dream?
The Budget 2016 process identified this as one of the Executive's flagship projects going forward.
Yeah.
For us, that has two impacts. It ring-fences the amount in any given year for this project, but it also provides assurance that at the Executive level there is a commitment to this project's delivery alongside its other flagship projects going forward. That is very important to us when we look at the size of the numbers that we anticipate spending this, particularly to 18-19 onwards, when we anticipate, at the main construction phase, it will be in the low 60s of millions per annum being spent in this project. It's a considerable chunk of money, and in the Executive's budget, planning for that level of money is now part of central planning alongside the other large investment projects that the Executive will be taking forward
You're
under that
confident
status.
that
It gives us added assurance that the money will be set aside for this project, if you like, first, and with a priority before the other commitments that we would be examined and would look forward within that.
Okay, well, I wish you every success in that. Will there be potential specialist services beyond the boundaries of Northern Ireland provided at this hospital? Will there be outside? Will there be people coming from other places to come to have the benefit of this when it's built? Do you reckon?
There are ongoing discussions about the delivery of some children's cardiac and congenital heart that would have a link with this facility, because that's where some of the clinicians and things would be based. But in terms of the numbers and the overall size and the planning that Martin has referred to in detail, most of that has been around our projected needs and how we would do that. But increasingly we do discuss areas of joint working where that can benefit both of us and where there may be people in both directions.
Okay.
We will continue to need to look outside Northern Ireland for some highly specialist services. As the committee will know, children's heart surgery will move to Dublin in the fullness of time under the All-Ireland Congenital Heart Disease Network. Children's catheterisation will be done in Dublin, as it currently is at the moment. But there will remain in Northern Ireland very strong diagnostic work in relation to children's cardiology, and full provision has been made for that in the new Children's Hospital.
As a continuation of what's there at the Royal Victoria Hospital at the moment, in relation to cardiac services, is that what you're saying? That some of that will still remain within this new hospital?
Yeah, paediatric catheterisation has moved to Dublin.
Yeah.
Children's surgery is largely being done in England at the moment, either in London or Birmingham, and around about the middle of 2017, early 2018, that will move to Dublin. But that will leave behind a lot of outpatient work, a lot of review work, and a lot of diagnostic workup of children in Belfast in terms of the All-Ireland network.
Right, okay. Right, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Kieran. Rosie, Gurma Carley, and thanks very much for the presentation. Can I ask you about the social clauses for the new build? It's in number 18 on page 55, and doesn't really give any detail. It just says social clauses, including aspects such as employer social requirements, new entrant training opportunities, opportunities for skilled experienced workers. It's as sketchy as that. And I've got information about the new Royal Hospital in Liverpool, and they have very, very detailed information on what their social clauses are going to entail, such as the new developer is called Carillion, and they will be building on a site which is right beside a very disadvantaged area. So in that respect, it would be similar to where the Royal's located. And they have agreed 750 jobs during construction, 60% of which must come from the local area and 15% from priority wards in the area. There's a lot more detail, but you get what I'm saying. There's very, very real commitments. Can you tell me something about the commitments beyond the vague references that are in the presentation?
We're fully aware and cognizant of the executive's policy in terms of the social clauses, and we take our CPD colleagues' advice on that, and in the different areas of a contract where we would begin and open up negotiations with any potential contractor in relation to the social clauses that would be elements of that. So what we have listed here are, if you like, potential contract terms that we would discuss with people when the main construction contract is to be put in place.
Do you mean like prior to appointment of a contractor?
Yes, that is to be done as part of the contracting process. The contracts that are let at the minute are for the smaller enabling works type stages on the site. It's anticipated that the main contract for the main construction, and when the money rises to some 60 million per annum, will be let in 2018, and it would be within that contract that the greatest scope for social clauses and other elements would exist, and those are areas that we would be hoping to discuss with any potential contractor as to where.
Could you give me some sense of what that might include?
It might include where we would hope that they would provide training for new entrants to the labour force, as we've said, where there may be skilled or experienced workers from an area who have recently laid off, or people who have been unemployed. We would discuss the range of those areas and training plans for the project, and to provide apprenticeships or other training.
Will you be quantifying what level of support?
There's a contracting balance between what you actually quantify and then whether that would bring an additional cost to the contract with it if we specify it as a contract term, or and there are elements of this where we would be discussing with contractors what their policies might be in terms of recruiting and training and developing either young people or more experienced people, or people with different labour market attributes that would either make them more or less competitive without some form of support in that. But
I'm just the detail that is in the Liverpool example is.
If they're at a
very,
further
very
stage
impressive.
in the process, is my own, they have a
but
contractor that they have put arrangements in place and reached certain agreements.
But they're very high-level commitments. Would you see this contract as being compliant in a similar way?
It would be compliant with the executive policy and social clauses.
So it's going to be minimum standard then?
There is the balance between what it, if we specify in the contract that it is a requirement of the contract, it can be taken into account then in the pricing of that contract by the contractor in terms of who they would employ and what they would employ. The contractors must also take account of the employment law and in terms of who they recruit and how they recruit them. But we will be applying fully the executive's policy in terms of social clauses in the contract to make sure that opportunities exist for those who are disadvantaged in the labour market, either young people or older people.
But would you be able to would you be able to get us any more information on what types of requirements you'd be wanting to see?
The list we've given is from the types of contracts that would exist and where the types of areas where we would look currently in contracting for social clauses.
Yes, I mean, I know what you're saying, but like we're on the cusp of a major development in West Belfast, and I would like to see some evidence that people who live there are going to benefit from it. And what I'm saying about this Liverpool example, this is clearly delivering for that local area in a very, very impressive way. And I would like to see what the department has in mind, when compared against something like that. Mm-hmm. So, where will it be on your list of priorities whenever you're seeking who do you appoint as a contractor? Would you be able to get me some more?
We can give you further information on that, and certainly as the project develops and as we would reach a point where discussions with a contractor, there's a stage at which, when you make it a contract condition or term at the outset, where it is in contracting terms it becomes something that you want to buy, and then there is a stage at which we examine the policies that all of the potential bidders to that contract might be applying to those that they would employ and use to help deliver this contract, and the extent to which, to the extent that we're allowed to take those factors into consideration when selecting a preferred contractor for this site, we can set out and show what we're allowed to accept as contractual conditions at that point.
There will be an opportunity for this committee to have this discussion before final decisions would be made on who would be appointed.
We're happy to keep this committee updated in the progress that we're making with the contract, in the process of delivering this project and taking forward the contract that we have. Social clauses is a policy that we're fully aware of and will want to meet, and it is executive policy that our major infrastructure projects would make every effort to benefit the locality in which they are served.
I'd say there'd be flexibility in there, and that's where the problem will be. It can be about how you might interpret what your responsibilities are. That's the thing. And I would be seeking
the contracting guidance on social clauses is quite complex. At points, as you specify it as a condition of something you're buying, and therefore you would pay for as an attribute in the project as to whether we would be prepared to pay extra in terms of the cost of the premises in relation to them employing more or less of a particular group of people, and at which point in time there's another aspect of it is where we can look at the policies of the actual companies who are proposing and bids in relation to this contract, and what they would intend to do as a matter of course and a matter of routine in their practices, and how they would deliver the project, recruit from the local area and provide opportunities for their workforce in terms of training and development and other opportunities that might be available.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, it would be good then for the committee to be kept up to date on any developments. Okay. Can I just ask you a question just about another subject in my constituency, just while you're here, if you will bear with me? It's to do with the Glenmona Resource Centre, and I know there's discussions ongoing because there's a danger that it could close down. I know the current Board of Management are withdrawn from it, and there are issues with the staff about pensions. There's also issues about the vulnerable young people who avail of the services there. Can you give me any update on what's happening there, please?
Yes, what I can say is that the service at Glenmona is a regional service commissioned by the Health and Social Care Board and paid for directly by the Health and Social Care Board on behalf of the trusts. We do know that the Health and Social Care Board are in direct discussions with the diocese and the trustees, and we await the outcome of those discussions. But what I can say from a Belfast Trust perspective is we stand ready to do anything that will be asked of us in relation to the future of the service. But we have to await the outcome of the discussions between the Health Board and the trustees, and the Health Board are leading on this matter.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sorry. Is that on now? No? No. Okay. I don't think any other members have indicated. Can I thank you for that? Just to go back to that second last point in relation to social clauses. I mean, SIB do have a toolkit. Yes. Because I know that in my own city we went through this debate with things like the Peace Bridge and the restoration of the Guildhall, and it's about maximising those clauses. So I think it would be useful because, you know, we do have a capital investment at 219 million.
Yes.
There is a toolkit there that can be applied to that in terms of a formula of how many people from the long-term unemployed can be employed, if you like. It would be very useful for us to get a sense of that breakdown.
Well, we're comfortable to do that. We are aware of the toolkit. I've met with SIB colleagues. Indeed, I've talked to them about developments in the Altnagalvin site in relation to it as well, and how we might apply it. And there is a procurement guidance note that is in place that is accepted policy that does set out in a little bit more detail some of the balancing issues between when you make it a contractual requirement and the other areas that you can consider as part of the selection processes that are just about the policies of the potential contractor themselves and how they would approach the issue and intend to approach it.
Okay, well, I think it would be useful to share that with the committee as well as we move forward. Okay, folks, thank you very much for your time and detail today.
Thank you, Chairman.
Martin, staying with us, I'm just being told. Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, members, the next item then is the briefing from the Belfast Trust and the Department on the breast cancer referral rates. members to pages 58 to 62 of your meeting pack. Just waiting until our guests arrive. Okay, folks, you're very welcome. We have a no order. Deborah McNeely, Deputy Secretary of Healthcare Policy Group at the Department. Martin, who is joining us again, Deputy Chief Executive of the Belfast Trust. And Mrs Jennifer Welch, Director of Surgery and Specialist Services at the Trust. And Samantha Sloan, who's Clinical Lead and Consultant Breast Surgeon at the Belfast Trust. You're all very welcome. Can I just invite yourselves in to make the presentation? We'll open up to questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I have some opening remarks. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the urgent or red flag breast cancer referral rates in the Belfast Trust. And I want to start, Chairman, by bringing the committee right up to date with the current position in the Trust. But just before that, I think it's very important for the committee to note that 94.5% of patients with a breast cancer diagnosis receive their first definitive treatment within the maximum 62-day waiting time target. Also would want to highlight that Northern Ireland has better clinical outcomes for patients with breast cancer when mortality rates per 100,000 population are compared with the rest of the UK. In terms of bringing the committee right up to date, Chairman, the current waiting time from receipt by the Trust of an urgent or red flag referral to the patient being seen at a one-stop clinic in the Belfast Trust is down to a maximum wait of 18 days as of the 7th of March 2016. The benefit of having a one-stop clinic, which is a triple assessment clinic, is that the majority of patients leave on the day with their diagnosis. Chairman and members, you will note from the briefing provided to the committee that following Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October 2015 and the launch of the Public Health Agency's Breast Cancer Awareness Campaign, the number of referrals into the Trust increased from about 60 or 70 a week to between 80 and 100 per week. This continued for an unprecedented period of 7 weeks. So we as a Trust were receiving an extra 20 to 30 referrals per week. And while based on previous years we usually see some rise in referral rates following awareness-raising campaigns, this year's increase in the rate of referral was some 35% higher than the years before. So this increased referral rate, coupled with a pre-existing capacity shortfall as well as consultant staff shortages, led to the drop in performance. During October to December 2015, the average wait was 18 days for those waiting longer than the 14-day target, and the maximum wait for any patient was 41 days. In previous years, any spike had been managed because the annual capacity largely met demand, and therefore smaller peaks or spikes in demand were able to be effectively managed within resources. However, throughout the whole of the calendar year 2015, the Trust saw an 18% increase in referrals to it. In 2015, the Trust managed a total of 2,759 urgent or red flag breast cancer referrals. 7.3% of these referrals, or 202 patients, were confirmed as having breast cancer. 121 patients who received a cancer diagnosis had not attended a one-stop clinic within the 14-day target, but reassuringly, 112 or 92.5% of those had commenced their first definitive treatment within the 62-day target, and the remaining 9 patients had received their first definitive treatment within an average of 86 days. The Trust has very recently received funding for a 4th consultant breast surgeon and will commence a 4th one-stop clinic from 14th of April 2016. This will give us the capacity for a further 20 to deal with a further 20 urgent or red flag breast cancer referrals to be seen per week. The Trust will also continue to run the additional evening clinics we have been running throughout March and April to manage the urgent red flag referral demand and to meet the required waiting time standard. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Martin. You made reference there to the from the 14th of April 2016. Is that in terms of the additional funding that you would have? You would be seeing through that extra 20 referrals a week?
Indeed, yes.
Is that because the report talked about an investment of 876,000 to expand breast cancer surgery?
Yes, the additional clinic will start from 14 to 16. And
Is that money will be used for the additional clinic? So is there a sense of how much, you know, what will be the cut-off point? How long will that money last? What big a difference will it make?
Perhaps I could pick up on that. So the business case that was developed for it was for a range of things, including the one-stop shop, and we're delighted to say that that is recurrent funding into the trust. So the fourth one-stop clinic will be starting on the 14th of April, but that will continue to run. So it's not for a fixed period of time. So that will enable us to
So the fourth clinic will be recurrent?
Yes.
Okay. And that will start on the 14th of April, and you've indicated 20 referrals a week through that.
It will give us the capacity to treat or to see an additional 20 or 30 patients each week over and above those that we're already seeing, so to take us up to that level of peak.
And just particularly interested in the fact that, you know, there can be often a correlation between cancer rates and deprivation. And I'm just wondering, do you have any analysis for things like screening uptake in areas of need, or even referral waiting times in areas of need, and obviously survival rates as well? You know, have the trust an analysis of that, or a view to that?
So we wouldn't look at that in that level of detail. That's probably information that we could seek from the Public Health Agency and share with you. I wouldn't say that there would be a difference in terms of referrals in, because those are done on a trust basis. But we can find out about an uptake in screening, for example, from different areas. And I'm not sure if Ms Sloan might want to comment from a clinical perspective.
It is recognised within the Eastern Screening Board area, which covers both South Eastern Trust and the Belfast Trust, that we do have a lower uptake of screening in some of the more deprived areas. That's been dealt with through the Public Health Agency, which holds the remit for screening rather than the Belfast Trust. And I understand that they are trying to invest in programmes with regard to where they place their mobile units and how they try and improve uptake of screening within that population. Also looking at the travelling community as well, because that's another risk issue.
Okay. And just supposed to go back to the initial point, Martin, are you satisfied, or can you assure us that the increased investment, if you like, of the 876,000, which will be recurrent funding, will take us out of some of the difficulties around delays and waiting times and red flags? Will it solve the problem effectively, is the question I'm asking?
Yes, we're confident that that will solve the problem once we have all of the staff in place. So at the moment we still have some vacancies. I'm delighted to say that the clinical team will cover those vacancies until such times as we have some of the permanent appointment in place. So Ms Sloan and some of her colleagues are making sure that we can run the fourth one-stop clinic, even though we still have one consultant vacancy.
And were the delays in terms of meeting the targets previously about not having the staff in place?
It was recognised that we didn't have sufficient capacity to meet the demand that was there, and that was then recognised in the business case, that additional capacity in terms of a further breast consultant and that extra clinic, as well as other theatre and operating time and things to run the entire service. So it was recognised that that was what was needed to deliver the service fully.
And this will now address it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the very last line of your briefing paper, page 62, titled Breast Cancer Survival Rates in Northern Ireland. And the last line is, if breast cancer is diagnosed and treated early at stage 1 and 2, 9 out of 10 women will survive. That's if. So, and when we see figures of red flag referrals to the Belfast Trust sitting at 24% in December, that's deeply concerning. When I asked Mr Pengali at committee when he was back here in October about the 14-day target, he responded by saying that Northern Ireland target was largely being dragged down by performance in the Belfast Trust. Why then are we reading that in November it was 32% and then 24% in December?
In October 2015, one of our senior members of staff is on long-term sick. So we lost capacity of cover of clinics. We did endeavour to try and fill that gap with use of a locum, but one of our big issues with that timeline was that October was the Public Health Awareness Campaign, Breast Cancer Month. And in that one calendar month, our normal referral rate practice would have seen 200 referrals potentially per calendar month. In October alone, we received over 400. So combining the almost double referral rate that we got with
the awareness is coming.
But it's not with the same peak we got this year. Every single trust has noted a huge increase in peak compared to what we managed before. We have seen it before, we can see that from our figures, and we do put additional clinics in to cover that. But the demand was high, in excess of what we have previously seen. And combined with our own staff issues,
one member of staff left, so it all went.
Well, it was a senior member of staff. We also have a staff grade shortage, and there's a change of job plan for another consultant into an academic commitment. So there were multiple issues that all compacted at the same time.
I should point out this is a very, very small consultant team. So the funding that we have been given to start the 4th clinic is related also then to the appointment of a 4th consultant. So at that time there would have been funding for 3, one of whom was off on long-term sick leave. So it's a very small team, and therefore if you have a single member of that small consultant team absent, it makes a significant difference. And I do take the point that the cancer awareness campaign happens every October, and we did plan for that, but the scale of the increase this year was not something that was expected by all the trusts, and all of us experienced significantly higher referrals than we had anticipated even with that awareness campaign.
So
it
was a growth of next year?
Yes.
Well, coming back to my raising with the Permanent Secretary, Mr Pengelly told me that the big issue was staff resources, and that the Belfast Trust had now secured additional resources. He went on to say that the Belfast Trust is now confident that by last October, it will be back to 100% compliance with the target. So we had 32% November and 24% December. So did anything else happen apart from surge in demand and as a consultant got off? Because you've already said, Jennifer, you still have vacancies. So with regards to a small team, one person off, this is a matter of life and death for potentially for these women.
So we were absolutely back on track, and at the time that Mr Pengelly would have given that message to you, that was correct. So for example, our figure in September 15 was 80%, having gone up from 50% in August. In October 15 it was actually 99%, and that was the time whenever the cancer awareness campaign went off, and also we had that level of staff sickness. So it meant that in November the performance was only 32%. So we were speaking
and
with
24% in December.
And 24% in December, that's correct. So whenever we were given that briefing to the Permanent Secretary earlier in the year, we had been confident that things were back on track, and none of the trusts, none of us foresaw the level of demand experienced through the cancer awareness campaign, as well as the staff sickness. So I think we could possibly have managed with one of those, or an element of that. I think with the combination of all of those things, there was a clear explanation of why we were dropping down to that low level, which we agree is not acceptable, and everyone has been working extremely hard to resolve that situation in as timely a way as we possibly could.
Again, a campaign that encourages women to come forward, and when they do come forward, we're looked at appalling statistics, and I'm quite concerned. You say there's still vacancies, so could we be in this situation again if another member of staff of that small team? I know you're talking about appointing a 4th consultant to take. It seems to be a recurrent theme with the vacancies as well.
What I'd said earlier on in relation to the 4th one-stop clinic is that it is starting on the 14th of April, and that's even before we make that permanent appointment, because the remainder of the clinical team. No, we have interviewed, but unfortunately the individual took up a post elsewhere. So we will be interviewing again and trying to secure that post. But
so
in
could
the meantime,
that be delayed if you're unable to secure?
No,
what I said earlier was
we have a commitment between our current clinical team that we are aiming to facilitate running the 4th clinic, and with running with the vacancy. We are looking at very stringent leave management, overlapping of responsibilities.
With that small team and a surge in demand.
Exactly. So we have to work with what we have available. We do not currently have a consultant in that post, but the current clinical team is committed to try and cover all the sessions and requirements that are needed, try and meet the demand as best we can. Over the last really 6-7 months, our team has always been running additional clinics in the evening. And so you've got to remember that that team is committing to both in daytime and an evening commitment as well, and they have agreed to continue that commitment until we are happy that we are consistently meeting the demand and getting our figures back up to the 100% we would like it to be.
So they'll be under increased pressure.
Exactly, and
that's takes off sick or
exactly. We have a small team that we work with. When we did run into some difficulties a few months before, at that stage we did utilise some other trusts to help sort of redirect some referrals and look more as a regional service rather than just as an individual trust-wide service. But we were informed that obviously referrals are at the GP's discretion, and therefore the GP determines where the referrals will be centred, and therefore our commitment is to deal with the referrals that are received within our unit in a timely fashion.
Are the South Eastern Trust still taking patients from Belfast to treat? No. And if potentially you don't be able to fill this post, or the staff's already under pressure, will that start again?
Unless at the present time we feel our figures have actually got improved significantly, that we do not need to go down that route. But if we feel there's a significant drop-off in performance again, then obviously we will be looking at how we can address that. We do not want to adversely affect the patients that we're being referred to.
It's just deeply concerning that potential lives are at risk because of this small team, which are unduly put under more pressure.
I think it's important to say, going back to the opening statements in Mr. Dillon's statement, we have had significant challenges at the 14-day part of the overall pathway. Whenever we look at a 62-day pathway, and this is the important bit, it's that time to treatment and not just the time to diagnosis. So on a 62-day pathway, that's whenever a GP may refer in an urgent or a red flag referral, and that's for someone with a suspect breast cancer, and that they would be seen at that initial one-stop clinic, that they would be diagnosed, it would be confirmed, it would be discussed at a multidisciplinary team meeting, there would be agreement on the treatment plan at the meeting and then with the patient, and the patient goes forward then for the first definitive treatment. And that has to happen in 62 days. And the important figure is that 94.5% of all women are receiving that first definitive treatment within 62 days. So I accept the challenges that we have had at the beginning of that pathway, the first 14 days of that 62-day pathway. And thankfully, even though some of them have waited even longer than 14 days, 94.5% of them were seen and treated within the 62 days. And that's the important bit. It's that first definitive treatment.
I just hope whoever's in the Health Committee next mandate isn't looking at figures like this for next year, because potentially women will be dying waiting if that isn't addressed.
Well, I suppose I would want to reiterate again, we agree that those figures on the 14-day pathway are not acceptable at all. But the 62-day pathway in terms of when someone is actually treated is an important one, and that is at 94.5%.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. Fergal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. How long can you go on stretching the present staff in an attempt to deal with the problem in the absence of the longer-term solution?
So there's a range of different things that we can do in there. So for example, the staff have given a commitment to keep this going. So it's not just the consultant medical staff. So we do have associate specialists and other staff who can act up into a consultant position. We can also look at locum cover. So there's a range of different mechanisms that we can bring in place. Obviously, our preference would be to make a permanent appointment into that post as soon as we possibly can.
And what stage are you in that process?
So we interviewed actually on the 22nd of February, and I would have very much liked to have been here today saying that we had made a permanent appointment into that. We will go back out to add again relatively soon, but I can't give you a definitive date in terms of when that would be or when we might definitely make an appointment. I think it's more likely that we would be looking at a locum to support what it is that we currently have in place.
So your attempt to get a full-time member of staff has not worked?
No.
What's the problem there? I don't want to get into the personal issues, but is there a problem there?
No.
That
no.
was so. When you advertised the first time, did you get a range of people?
We had one applicant. We had one applicant.
So the chances of you getting another applicant are what?
At the current time, I think it is probably slim, which is why I think we would be looking at locum support.
So it sort of brings me back to my first point. How long can this system be stretched? You know, I mean, I value the contribution that staff are making across the range, and I think that's an important thing for the committee to recognise. Once again, you know, staff are you know, putting their shoulder to the wheel against the system strain, but that's not acceptable. And you know, it shouldn't be that the system should look after. So how long can it go on for?
Well, I suppose practically, I just want to explain what it is we actually have in post at the moment, and maybe do you want to give that?
So currently, the Belfast Trust is funded for 4.5 full-time equivalent consultants. Bearing in mind we have a long-term absence and examinees at the moment, we currently have one of our associate specialists acting into one of those consultant roles. We have a part-time consultant who's also shared with academia, and there's myself as a full-time consultant, and we do have another full-time consultant. So in essence, we are currently running with 3.5 rather than 4.5. But in addition, we do have a specialty doctor, two specialty doctors and other supporting staff. So using that combined team and how we have looked at our job plans and the fact we have no other commitments outside of breast surgery, then we can cover the sessions within a fashion that we feel is safe and able to do so. How long can we continue it? As long as we need to.
Incidentally, I would have preferred if you'd maybe told us at the start that you'd been unsuccessful in the rather than the perception being given that we were in the process of getting somebody when in fact that process had ended and there wasn't somebody. Can I just look at the wider? There's a disparity in terms of the trusts as well, in terms of the figures. What's the explanation for that?
You mean individual trusts?
Yeah, well, across the trust there's a disparity or a variation.
Yep.
You know, we had 11% of referrals been seen in time in the Northern Trust, 24% in the Belfast Trust. We've had an explanation around the Belfast Trust, but what's the disparity? And then we also have the South Eastern Trust well down, even ahead of the campaign.
Well, the issues are very similar in terms of the other trusts. I think my colleagues had referred to the very significant increase in demand that we had, particularly as a result of the health promotion campaign. And while actions had been taken in all of the trusts anticipating a spike in demand, they hadn't anticipated the spike in demand that we saw. Over the 3 months, September, October, November, just taking as an example, there were 1,020 more referrals in than there had been in the previous comparative period for the year before. Overall in the year, April to January, there's nearly a 25% increase in the demand coming through here. Now, in terms of the figures for February 16, the position has dramatically improved across all of the trusts. And as a region, we're now sitting at 99% in the provisional figures for February 16 of patients seen within the 14-day pathway. In terms of that, they have all been holding in terms of dealing with this. The measures that they've been taking are additional clinics and trying to take this through. But by way of illustration, I mentioned the figure of over 1,000 extra referrals, September, October, November. That's approximately the equivalent of 68 additional clinics. So it just gives you an indication of the demand, but the issues in the other trusts are very similar to what we've discussed today.
Yeah, although I noticed that the South Eastern dropped down significantly in August, well ahead of any campaign. So what are the specific issues there?
In August, during June, July, my colleagues keep me right, during June, July, I think we referred to the fact that as a region, the South Eastern Trust took over 90 patients from the Belfast Trust to help in terms of managing the demand. So that had a bit of a knock-on effect in terms of their own performance in that period. But it was the right thing to do in terms of trying to manage the demand across the region.
Can I just return to because the headlines here, and you know, obviously, you know, the headlines are headlines, but to have it characterised as the worst ever NHS performance is quite an indictment. And you know, I appreciate you're stretching the staff and you're looking for locums. Are there other answers to try and resolve this in a longer term way that you that you could explore to try and resolve this?
The very clear thing, certainly in the case of the Belfast Trust, was absolutely a lack of capacity compared to the demand and of what it was that we needed to see, and that was recognised by the Health and Social Care Board and the Public Health Agency, and that's why they've made the investment that they've had. So in order for us to make sure that we stay at 100%, it was important that that is recurrent investment, and as you've heard there, my clinical colleagues are content to keep this going. But that's what it has to be. It's recurrent investment and getting all of the right people in the post and making sure that that is a sustainable and safe service.
Can I, just on one final point, obviously there's a big issue around the banking agency system and locum, where in fact it encourages people not to go into a permanent position because there's a premium within that. And is there anything that's attaching to that dynamic in this situation?
Not in relation to this service.
And I would just say from a clinical perspective, what we're seeing in Northern Ireland is not just specific to Northern Ireland. Actually, across the UK as a whole, there's a shortage of breast radiologists and breast surgeons. There's lots of units who are running with vacancies and having difficulty to maintain and staff. One of our problems is we obviously want to make sure we're delivering a safe service, and we don't want to have someone in post who's not properly qualified or trained or able to deliver the service that needs to be provided. So that's why we are very cautious about using locum provision at senior levels. We want to make sure we have a good, robust service that's going to keep our patients safe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Pam's next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for being here today and for what we've heard so far. Most of the questions have been asked, but just in the back of what you're saying there on the shortage across the whole of the UK on breast clinicians, for a better word. What is the reason for that? Is that because of the success of these campaigns? Is it on the back of that? And are you saying, are you surprised, I suppose, as part of the question, at the amount of referrals that are coming through, and have you any comment on what stage of cancer some of these patients are at?
Firstly, we have seen within our own trust and certainly across the region, I think all the clinicians recognise that the number of referrals we're receiving are year on year increasing. Part of that is because ladies are more aware of and through breast awareness campaigns, if they don't say anything early, to seek attention. But as you see from our briefing paper, if you look at the number of urgent flag referrals, the actual percentage of cancer diagnosis is only 7%. So a lot of what's prioritised and seen as an urgent red flag referral is actually not cancer. But it's very hard for a patient to know that. We can know that once we've gone through the assessment and the investigations. With regard to the manpower issues, it's a bigger issue. There are problems with regard to recruitment into surgery as a subspecialty. You'll have seen the things with regard to UK-wide performance with regard to recruitment into specialist services and gaps in training and junior doctor provision. If we don't have the junior doctors going in to be trained, we will not have the senior doctors to run a consultant-delivered service. That is the thing that's specifically different about breast surgery, is it's predominantly a consultant-delivered service. We do have some advanced practitioners, nursing team, associate specialists to help support our service, but it's predominantly a consultant-delivered service, and that's a very different remit compared to some of the other specialties.
I suppose it's difficult, especially in this day and age. Then obviously there's big pressure on GPs as well, and
yes.
Maybe they're feeling duty bound to refer just in case, afraid of someone slipping through the net.
As a region, we have about 12 to 1,500 in situ or invasive cancers as a region. So for each individual GP, they may at most see one cancer in a year that is a true cancer, but they will see multiple ladies with breast concerns, breast pain, lumpiness, nipple discharge, and they don't know, is this my one or is this something else? So they will appropriately refer per the guidance that is there and for assessment, and they're all categorised and graded and then dealt with. Thankfully, the majority of them actually turn out not to be cancer, but we still have to treat everybody as if they need to be assessed and seen.
I presume you as a clinician would rather see these women and give them the all clear as
exactly.
Not having
And if you look at how the service is provided in Northern Ireland, we currently have a triage system of a 14-day urgent and routines. Obviously, mainland England have moved to a 14-day regardless, but obviously that service was had a high increase in investment and provision to allow trust at that stage to deliver that. We're currently working on a 14-day for urgent red flags.
Can I just say, finishing off, that I'm actually very impressed with what I'm hearing today, because we hear so much bad news, but I'm actually very impressed to see and hear how this situation has been dealt with, because it is life or death for some, and it certainly puts my mind at ease to hear the professionalism that's going on and the good work that is being done, and how you're all working together and across trusts to deal with these huge upsurges. And I think to probably the PHF, they congratulated too for the success of the cancer campaigns as well. So well done, thank you.
Thank you, Pam. And Rosie's next.
For my wee Carly. Thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. Can I ask, do you see this, the Belfast Trust, the 60 to 70 referrals a week? How many of those do you have a percentage that result in a diagnosis of cancer?
Well, I'm trying to work this out in my head. If we say 60 to 70 red flag referrals per week in a weekly clinic setting, we probably will diagnose between 5 to 10 cancers at most, and some weeks we'll not diagnose any cancers at all. So there's a lot of fluctuation.
So over the year, it works out at 7.3%. Of all the referrals coming in, 7.3% was of a confirmed cancer.
There were 2,759 urgent red flag referrals, and 202 patients were confirmed with a diagnosis of cancer.
Oh, right, okay. And I'm just looking in your in the report. It says that in the last paragraph again, that while we are doing well here as a region, we're still behind many European countries. And which countries would be the best? And are they doing anything differently? What would be different?
So what we have, certainly the report that I have was around, yes, Northern Ireland has better clinical outcomes for patients with breast cancer. Yes. But the UK in general is behind some of the other European countries.
Yes, so some of Scandinavian countries have different screening programs, different age of awareness campaigns. I think the UK figures for Northern Ireland are very good, as a region within the whole.
I think it's difficult to say. If the question is specifically on clinical outcomes for patients, yes, Northern Ireland, it does best out of the UK as a whole. Certainly other countries have invested, as Ms Sloan has said, in better screening programmes. There could be a range of factors in there in relation to, for example, access to cancer clinical trials, which may be higher in those countries than it might be here. It might be access to a cancer drugs fund. So there's a wide range of factors in there that would determine why another area would have better clinical outcomes.
And do you know which countries would be in the top of the league, let's say?
It's the Scandinavian countries.
Scandinavian countries. So do you propose to look at what they're doing and improving what we're doing there?
I mean, certainly that's something that I know the Health and Social Care Board and the Public Health Agency would look at in terms of how they commission services and the type of things that would need to be looked at for the entirety of Northern Ireland. So Belfast Trust would then feed into that process.
Right. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, well, thank you for your time today.
If I could just beg your indulgence, Chairman,
yes.
just to say for the record, and I think committee have had a sense of this. I mean, in the Trust, we couldn't hope for a more committed, dedicated or compassionate breast care team. We're very much aware of the fact that, we're talking about real women with real fears, real anxieties here, who want to know as early as possible whether they have cancer or not. And we will leave no stone unturned of improving our performance against the 14-day target. I hope the committee takes some reassurance from the fact that, as we say, that almost 95% of those patients who are diagnosed with cancer do commence their treatment within the 62-day target. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I mean, I think we will take even more reassurance once we see that the staffing issues are resolved as well and moving forward. Okay, thank you for your time today. Members, moving on then to item 13, which is matters arising. 4 items, 1 at page 80 and 3 at pages 13 to 28 of your table pack. I'm just asking members to note at this point. And as this is the last scheduled meeting, then the committee just to seek agreement that any further responses received will be emailed to members for information. Item 14 then is correspondence. There are 4 items of correspondence at pages 82 to 217 of your meeting pack, and 4 items at pages 13 to 28 of the tabled pack. Asking members if you are content to note the correspondence. Again, as this is the last scheduled meeting, just want to seek agreement for the committee office to forward any other correspondence received, advising the authors to write again once the new committee is established. So item 15 is any other business?
Yes,
Joanne, Pam and Kieran.
I'll go first.
Yes, okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, it was just on the back of a conversation we had earlier at the APG and Infertility, and we've been presented with this news article from the Irish News about the Republic of Ireland funding or announcing their intention to fund fertility treatment in the Republic of Ireland, which is something that wasn't done before. And it was to see whether we could ask any questions to the department on this, to see whether they have any discussions with the Republic, maybe in ways of cooperation, to see if there's any areas of cooperation that can be done on the whole infertility issue. And also, on the back of this, I would like to think that there may be a chance that the pressures on the services here in Northern Ireland may be slightly even reduced by the introduction of infertility treatment funded by the Republic. Given that with the border issues and where people work, and we know there are people who live in the Republic who are able to access infertility treatment in Northern Ireland. So it's just to see whether we could see if there's going to be any let up in the funding in Northern Ireland, that it might even help us get towards that one full cycle that we've been looking for those who suffer from infertility in Northern Ireland.
Yep, happy to do that in light of that decision, to see what areas of cooperation could be explored there in relation to, even potentially any new north-south collaboration going forward. Okay, thank you. Joanne?
Thanks, Chair. I've been asked to raise an issue with regards to the charity Hope for Fibromyalgia and ME. As part of their ongoing campaign for awareness and education into fibromyalgia and ME, the charity issued an invitation in November, offered to cover costs and admission to attend for a senior health official to attend, or any health official, to attend the largest annual ME conference in the UK in June. Now, the charity was going to cover the costs. Now, the invitation was sent to the Minister, and he did come back, and understandably to say that he couldn't attend. He then redirected to the HSCB. The charity has waited a further 2 months for a response. And they've just come back, I think it was yesterday, to say that no official at all at any level was available to attend. Now, given the fact the group has lobbied extensively hard over the last 6 years, this is a major setback, because they estimate there's about 7,000 patients in Northern Ireland with fibromyalgia and ME, deeply concerned at the lack of specialist NHS services here. So, is there anything we can do as a committee to urge? There's bound to be an official that could attend the conference and bring back.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, there is a particular issue around ME and the lack of services and the lack of support network. So happy as a committee to write back to the department to seek representation.
And they're covering all costs. They just won't feel that they're being ignored. And can I thank you for that? It's such an important issue, and so many people affected by it.
Okay, and Kieran?
Yeah, Chair, I've just wanted to put on record, you may have heard the news this morning where the Trust, the board and everybody else is abolishing the smoking outside our hospitals, in fact outside cars, and even in the cars. And I'm not a smoker, and I'm very much in favour of banning cigarettes and pipe tobacco and all the rest of it. But on this occasion, I think that they have overstepped the mark. They have went too far because there were people. I mean, they couldn't even keep people away from the front doors of hospitals up until now, despite the fact that they weren't supposed to do that. And how on earth are they going to prevent people from smoking in their cars in the car park? And I don't think they should be spending money chasing people like that. I think that it has been heavy-handed, and it has come. They're trying to do too much too soon, and I just don't think it's right.
Points well made, and I was going to say we're determined to get the last word in this mandate.
No,
Kieran. Good for you. Good for you.
I just want. I mean, I'm a smoker, and I detest smoking. I was a smoker, detest smoking. But going into the Ulster Hospital, for instance, I mean, why people hang around front doors of hospitals, I don't know. The authorities were not able to scatter them in that. How are they going to prevent them from going to their cars or even round the back of the hospital?
Enforcement is a big issue.
Yeah, and I do have a sympathy for smokers that would want to get off but can't get off. And where are they going to go? Where are they going to? What are they going to do? Are they going to? I don't know.
Okay, points well made, and thank you for that. Can I just remind members then that this is the last meeting scheduled for the mandate, and to wish everybody every success and whatever lies ahead of us, and particularly to wish yourself, Kieran, every best, every bit of good fortune in the future as you're not joining us again.
And before you go, can we get a photograph of us? Neil, can you take a picture of the
Assembly Senate, programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate, programme sound.